So the third and final category is that self and others are equal from the viewpoint of ultimate truth. Okay, if friends, enemies, and strangers were truly existent from their own side, had nothing to do with our view of them, the Buddha would see them also that way. So, think the Buddha has enemies? It's a demonstration or a show that these things are relative truths, that the friend, enemy, stranger comes from our own mind. They're not truly existent. Like there's not a truly existent enemy, there's not a truly existent friend, there's not a truly existent stranger. They're all completely dependent upon causes and conditions. And most of those causes and conditions are in our own minds, like that. So there's not like that. If the second part of this is that if they were truly existent, then the friend would always be the friend, the enemy would always be the enemy, and the stranger would always be a stranger, and there's nothing we could do to change that, because it would be existing from their side, have nothing to do with our minds. It's just how they would always appear to us that way. And we know that that's not true. So the third and final part of this is the idea of self and others. There is truly existing self and truly existing others. But from your view, who's the truly existing self and who's the truly existing other? I've suddenly become other than yourself, like this. And when we look at the one where I'm the solitary being and all these other beings, this is self and there are others, but from all those others, I'm the other and each one of them is the I or the self. And this is, it's like here and there. When I'm here and you're there, if we trade places, here is over there and there is here again. I mean, they're relative terms. It's completely relative terms. And one doesn't exist without the other. There's no such thing as other without the identity of self. If there's no self, there's no other. And this is one that's can take a lot of, it's an opportunity to do a lot of meditating, because the words sound really obvious, but when we start looking at it, it's really, really hard to see. It's really hard to see. It's this interdependence, this dependence. High depends on low. Low depends on high. Here depends on there. There depends on here. This side of the mountain depends on that side of the mountain. All these things are relative terms, like that. And self and other is exactly the same way. We can't. We have this differentiation, and when you get further into this exchanging self for others, oh boy, I gotta be careful. This is a really big tangent. when we see the suffering of others is unbearable, because there's no difference between me and you. And whatever problem you have, it's if I have a thorn in my foot, it's not in the hand, so why does my hand go down and pull the thorn out? It's a little vague thing, but it's this responsibility that if we recognize this equality of self and others, what we're trying to do here, what comes of it is this equality of we're all wanting exactly the same thing, to be happy and be free from suffering. And for us to recognize that we can't discriminate between friend, enemy, and stranger. We are all in the same situation. We're all stuck in samsara. We all have our own different flavors of samsara. We have different lives. We're all very unique because of all the accumulation of experiences we've had that have created the way our mind thinks and the way we behave. But we're all very much exactly the same, even though we have these differences, and they're very obvious differences. But the problems all come from believing that something exists which does not exist at all. I just kicked the can there. Okay. We're going on another tangent now. We believe that everything we see and experience exists exactly the way that it appears to us. We believe there's this independent identity we hold that's concrete, it's not dependent on anything. There's a truly existing I existing somewhere in this body-mind complex. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit, and if you're not familiar with this, we just have to gloss it a little bit because we don't have the time to really describe this completely. But we have what we call 5 aggregates. We have a form aggregate, and we have 4 mental or conscious aggregates: feelings, discernments, karmic formations, and consciousness. And we somehow, in that collection of 5 aggregates, we identify that this is me. And for these five aggregates to be truly existent, they can't depend on anything. They can't depend upon parts. They can't be dependent on causes and conditions. And they can't be dependent on being labeled. So if we start with the body is completely dependent on mom and dad. You know, if mom and dad weren't there wouldn't be a body. So this body doesn't have true existence from its own side. It's a dependent arising. It depends upon mom and dad. It depends on food. It depends on shelter, clothes, all these things we've experienced to have this body. Feelings depend upon contact. There's got to be a sense organ, a sense power, a previous moment of consciousness, and it has to make contact with something. Like I can't have a feeling I can't have this feeling of this lid without making contact with it. I can't, the eye contact can also see it, but there has to be a contact between the sense organ and the object. And discernment is that which allows us to choose an object, like to recognize that this is a cup. And so that's dependent upon the cup. And it's dependent upon, here again, one of our sense consciousnesses of eye, ear, nose, touch, like that, making contact with it to see that there's something there. And then the karmic formation is this accumulation of our experience that we decide about it, what it is, and what we think about it. And that's completely dependent not only on the object and the feelings and the discernment, but this history we have, our karmic history that allows us. For me, this is a cup. For the spider up in the corner over there who can make contact with us, it's not a cup. You know, there's this karmic reality we have. And then consciousness is this continuity of a previous moment of awareness that allows this moment of awareness to take place. And so we have these five aggregates, none of which has true existence. They're all dependent upon something else for them to just be. And so we have these five things that are completely dependent on other factors. And somehow in those five things, that combination, we see something that's truly existent, that's not dependent on anything. Am I making any sense at all when I say that? It's like if we have an orange is not an apple. Right? If we have 5 oranges, we still don't have an apple. You know, it's the same thing with these 5 aggregates. It's not the same, it's similar. You know, that we have this idea of true existence, and we identify ourselves, we label something, label I, and then we have this idea about who I is, who I am, who I am, and we behave accordingly. Like whoever challenges or reinforces that identity then becomes friend, enemy, stranger. And that identity is totally made up. You know, we've made it up and we believe it. And we function in the world from the story we tell about ourselves. You know, and we suffer for it. You know, it creates all of our problems. Without this idea about who I am that keeps me, this separation between self and others, that keeps this separation going is the problem maker. That my happiness is more important than yours. This identity that I have that I'm supporting is more important than yours. And this is what all of this, the Buddha's teachings is trying to unravel this misapprehension about reality like that. And so, very rough and coarse like that. So, I'm going to bail on this now. So, if you have questions, I'd really like to have a conversation then.
We have a microphone for people online and for the recordings, but not for the room, so we just speak loud.
And on top of that, I have my hearing aids in.
You can just speak to him loud.
So, Venerable, my question is, I think both methods of bodhicitta I've understood over the years conceptually, but I think in practice, at that moment of aspiring to put others above yourself, what I've noticed is that there is a lot of fear that arises, and a very childlike fear of what will happen to me, who will take care of me. And it's an upsurge of fear in that moment which comes in the way. And I was wondering if through practice or, you have any comments on that.
We're not trying to put ourselves away or put ourselves down. We're not trying to say that I shouldn't be happy, I shouldn't enjoy. It's not that. Actually, I have this quotation right here I pulled up. And this is, I think this is from Lotus Rinpoche. And it says, giving the best to others and taking on the worst for ourselves is what is known as exchanging self with others. And this isn't meant to say that I shouldn't enjoy. It's just that if you and I arrive at the dinner table and there's one piece of pie left, please, you have the pie. If we come in, there's two pieces of pie, well, here we are, we each get a piece of pie. But the idea is that my need for that should, ideally I would rather you have the pie. Just because if I cherish, the cause of happiness is cherishing others. And if I want to be happy, we know that when we share and give to others, it makes us happy. Whereas if we're, oh God, there's only one piece of pie left, I hope she doesn't take it. It's a suffering. Our mind just goes south. Whereas if we actually have this wish for this other person to be happy, it's not like we're babies. We're all beginners, and so we can't expect to be like the great bodhisattvas of the past, who gave body parts away and all these things like that. We're not. We're still working on who's going to have the piece of pie, and so it's completely fine. And then it's great to be challenged by that. We can see our mind saying, well, I'd really like to have that pie, and I hope, there's some left when I get there. But that's the challenge, to really recognize our selfish mind, like that, to realize that's what's causing our problem. It's not the pie. It's not somebody else having the pie. It's our mind thinking that I can only be happy if I have the pie. Like that? I'm not sure.
Just speak loud to him.
Venerable, there's a concept of self and
Of-
other.
Yes.
Venerable, the concept of I that doesn't exist and the concept of other that doesn't exist are dependent upon one another. And if we are to realize that an inherently existent I doesn't exist and the inherently existent other doesn't exist, what is there? Is there something?
Independently, I've got to turn this down when I talk. What doesn't exist is true existence. What does exist is dependent arising. That things exist depending on causes, conditions, it depends on parts, and mostly in the most subtle level depends on the label. You know, what should I say? This is Rubina's. She always does her glasses. So we agree that this is a pair of glasses, okay? And if it's a truly existent pair of glasses, it shouldn't be depending on anything. If it depends on something, it's not truly existence. It's a dependent arising, okay? So if this truly existed, I could take these off and we say, do I still have a pair of glasses? Do I take the lens out? Do I still have glasses? I take the nose pads. You know, you take these out and you take all the parts away, then you should still have a pair of glasses. But we know that's not true. We know that we've got to have all these together, and then we have a basis for labeling glasses. I like the cup better because the spider in the corner still sees this, we think it sees this form in some way, and it's not a cup to the spider. To us, it's a cup because it functions. It holds liquid. You know, I can drink some water, put it down, but it's dependent on, like I said, the clay, the water, the potter, the kiln, all these things had to happen for it to come to the thing. And it's dependent on the shape, having a flat bottom and a handle, and these things, those are the parts. And the conditions are somebody made it, but it's still not a cup. It's a valid base for labeling cup. This is one that Lama Zopa does a lot of, and I'm going to do something here. So, the first day you went to, say first grade or something like that, and the teacher on the chalkboard makes those 4 lines. Okay? First time you've ever seen them. There's just this design on the board. And it means nothing to you. And then the teacher says, this is the letter M. Oh, okay, so that shape is called an M. And shortly thereafter, we believe that that's an M. Before that, there was no M. Not until we got the label M did we believe there's an M. Okay, we still there? Mm-hmm. Okay. So if there's a truly existent M, it's not dependent on parts. So you start pulling lines away, thinking that when you get these parts away, there'll still be an M there. And we know that's not true. You've got to have those 4 lines arranged in that configuration that we can label that M, and it functions. The key is that it functions. You know, it works for us in our language. You know, our 26 letters in our alphabet makes something like 1 million different words, and they're all dependent on parts and being labeled. If you do this one, and the teacher said this is the letter O, okay? But according to the label, it's also 0. According to the label, it's the shape of the sun. According to the label, it's the shape of a pizza. It completely depends, this form, how it appears to us is completely dependent on the label we place on it as to what we can make it function as. You know, so before the teacher said this is the letter M, there was no M existing whatsoever for us. It comes from the label and us believing that. And it's useful, but there's not a truly existing M. The only M exists is the one that we've labeled on those 4 lines. There's no other M anywhere. It completely comes from our mind. And everything we know, everything we comes from somebody else giving us a label for whatever object it might be. And we believe that it comes from the side of the object and not from the mind labeling it, and believing the label. Debating someone, please? So, what doesn't exist is a truly existing M. What does exist is a merely labeled M. Merely labeled means there's nothing except that. There's not something more than that. You know? The different philosophical schools of Buddhism, all of them except the Prasangika Madhyamika, will say that there's something there that exists that is the object. They'll all find something, but it's only the most subtle, or we say the highest is this Prasangika Madhyamika that says everything exists only by being merely labeled. And that's it. Nothing more than that. And it all functions. It's almost as if something doesn't exist at all, but it does. It's just sort of like a knife edge to keep from falling over, to think that something absolutely exists, or to thinking that nothing exists, which is a terrible mistake. Things exist, but they exist by just being merely labeled. There's not I hope I haven't confused you. I'm just never quite sure.
It's as clear as it's ever been.
Okay, thank you.
Just speak louder.
Okay. Venerable, if we accept that there is no difference, there's all these infinite, semi-infinite kind of life forms. There's humans and there's animals and there's all these kind of sentient beings that are unknowable in their huge, huge number, and that we all want the same thing. We want to be free from suffering, and we want happiness. How do we think about some of those sentient beings that we may know better, or that we feel we have more of a duty of intimacy or care, like our family or our friends. You know, we have a limited time in this life to be compassionate to other beings. How do we think about making decisions for the people and the things that we know well, when we know that there are all these other billions of things that we should be compassionate about as well?
What His Holiness says, and also Lama Rinpoche, is that when you go back to this meditation we did, when we look at the ones who are closest to us and how we think about them, like that. Generally speaking, that's a real obstacle, because the love we have from them is from attachment. And that attachment is the one that says, I love this person because they're nice to me. You know? It's not the one that's unconditional, you know? And it's the one that prevents us from being able to have this love for all beings, like that. At the same time, the ones that are closest to us are the ones that we need to practice our love and compassion on. We can't like stand on them to get to the countless ones. You know, whoever's closest to us is the one that's the most important at that point in time. But it doesn't mean I'm wishing them to be more happy than I'm wishing the stranger to be happy. My wish for them to be happy is exactly the same. You know, but the ones that I'm closest to, these ones I can actually help. These other ones I can, you know, I can wish and hope that I can have an opportunity at some point in time. But I don't dismiss them, and I don't, it's equanimity of, just as I want this one to be happy, the one that's so close to me, I want this one that I don't even know or just have some idea exists someplace else. I want them to be happy exactly the same. You know, there's not a, yeah, is that helpful? Did I cover everything, or is there more?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to think of it practically, that there are things that are closest that you can practice.
Yeah.
What use is there for concepts such as misogyny or racism, where fundamentally those are just ideas?
I'm sorry, go on.
Sorry, let me say it a bit louder. What use is there for concepts such as misogyny and racism when they're labels and they're made up? And some may find them useful because they're highlighting a kind of discrimination.
Well, it comes from ignorance. This idea about who's responsible for my happiness and who I'm blaming for my unhappiness. You know, the wonderful, for me, part of Buddhism is the fact that I'm responsible for my own happiness. I'm responsible for my own misery. To blame it on somebody else, whether it's misogyny or race or how somebody picks their nose or whatever it might be, is misplaced. You know, it's like if I have a problem here, and I take the arrow and shoot it this direction. Like there's no chance in the world of solving the problem as long as I'm pointing outside. The source of the solution for anything we're experiencing, unhappiness or success, whatever, is here. And it begins with a kind heart, one that's altruistic and wishing others well. And in that, there's no space for blaming others, like, well, this race of people, or this whatever the sexual people might be, whatever their flavor or preference is, has nothing to do with my happiness. You know, I'm responsible for my own. You know, and I can't blame. If it's a black person or a brown person or whatever, I can't blame somebody else for my problems, because if I do, there's no chance of solving it, because that's not where the problem is out there. The problem is here. You know, it's not someplace else. And so to see someone who's functioning under that illusion, it means they're really unhappy. They have no chance of solving their problem, so they become a source of compassion, a target, an inspiration for compassion, and wishing them to have happiness and be free from suffering. Because as long as they project outside that this is my problem over there, this is my problem here, this is my problem, we got to go away with this, we've got to get, there's no chance of being happy. You know, so they become objects of compassion. It's a few years ago when I taught the Kopan course, I got into trouble because I kept talking about Donald Trump. But maybe I can do that here and not get in trouble. Can I say something? Is it okay? To me, he's an incredible object of compassion. Not only the fact that he's obviously has no chance of being happy as long as he's operating the way he is, but the fact that what he's creating for his future lives is horrendous. Horrendous. For countless lifetimes, this being is going to have difficulties, and really big difficulties. And so we can oppose what he's doing, but we can't have hatred. You know, what we have is compassion for him, wishing that he could. Be careful how I talk. I have a potty mouth. Just wishing he could figure out, because he has also countless times been our mother. He's been our father. He's been our best friend, our most dear person, the one who saved our lives countless times, who's given up his life to help us. You know, it's just this one instant and this beginningless time that this behavior here is going on. And so it becomes an object of compassion, not one of derision and whatever it might be. You know, and here again, it still doesn't mean we don't try to oppose what he's doing or anybody else like that. But there's this, you know, we have to recognize this equality, equanimity through all beings. Was that helpful?
Very helpful.
I've got to turn this up. These things get controlled through my phone, and I have to turn it up to here, but if it's up like this loud, I can't talk. Okay, I'm ready.
You mentioned before about remember more someone that hurt you than someone being kind to you. What is your opinion on that? I find it true, but why?
Maybe not as gross. No, I don't think it's as gross as what I was saying, but it's like we tend to remember harms people have done to us, and we hold on to them. Whereas when people have been kind to us, and we don't forget that, but we're maybe a little more. You know, we're just looking for a little more benefit, and we're not like, there's not a satisfaction that comes there somehow. I'm not saying that's across the board or anything, but there's this flavor to it. Whereas when somebody's done us, you know, somebody has soiled our reputation, or, you know, done something that really upsets us, we remember that. We have these conversations in our mind about what I'd really like to tell them, you know, when I have the opportunity or whatever. And whereas when someone's been kind to us, it's not like we forget the kindness, but it doesn't stick in the forefront quite like someone who has harmed us does. Like that. You know, I'm not sure.
We are more sensitive to unsatisfaction than satisfaction, you think?
Well, the thing is you know, one of the faults of samsara is there's no satisfaction. You know, no matter. It's like, you know, if someone praises you, that's great, but give me a little more. You know, it's like there's never that satisfaction. You know, if one is good, two is better. You know, this is one of these major faults of samsara is that there's no satisfaction. You know, we because here again we assign this object or event outside of ourselves this quality. If we decide I like chocolate ice cream. Right? And so if I don't have chocolate ice cream, I can't be happy. We've made chocolate ice cream into the creator, like almost a god. It's the creator of my happiness. You know, this chocolate ice cream makes me so happy. And the point is back to this, is that it's fine to enjoy the chocolate ice cream, and we can be happy with it, but we should be just as happy when we don't have it. You know, we should, you know, purpose of life is to be happy, and so we should enjoy chocolate ice cream. We should enjoy whatever it might be, but not to be attached. If we're attached to it, we assign to it the fact that that is causing me happiness, and it's not. We get this unhealthy relationship with it, whereas I'm willing. My happiness is more important than yours, and so I'm willing to do whatever I need to have to make sure I get the chocolate ice cream, and I get the most of it. You know, this is how the world functions. You know, and so we have to. We can't allow these outside, we have to recognize where it's coming from, because then we can fix it. If we understand it comes from our own minds, or whereas we assigned that. Are you all familiar with the 12 links at all of dependent relation? The craving and grasping. With a feeling, and the craving is really wishing to have the pleasure of chocolate ice cream, having the pleasure of it. The grasping is grasping the chocolate ice cream as the cause of the happiness we seek. You know, and that's in those links. That's the one that. So this, you know what tar baby is when we talk about. Yeah, I got you there. There's an old Uncle Remus story where they make it, you know, the bear rabbit makes a tar baby, and the bear wolf and bear come up, and they stick the tar baby, and their fist gets stuck in it. Okay, and they can't get away. Anyway, this now I forgot where I was. I got so excited about bear rabbit. Anyway, as soon as we buy into the idea that that is what is giving me pleasure, and I can't be happy without it, that we completely, and then once we decide that that is what it is, there's never enough of it. Because as soon as we're unhappy, well, if I just had a little bit more of it, then I'd be happy. You know, that's why we see people who, Jeff Bezos started out Amazon in his garage, and now he's got who knows what, and he's still not satisfied. You know, it is, you always have to have more, because as soon as you buy into the idea, well, if I had the $1 million, cool, but wouldn't 2 million be better? And wouldn't be 100 million be better? There's never satisfaction. As long as you buy into the fact that that happiness comes from outside.
So we should not eat the ice cream.
Hmm?
We should not eat the ice cream.
No, we should eat the ice
We
cream.
should change our perception when we eat
No,
it.
we should enjoy the ice cream completely. But at the same time, when we don't have ice cream, we should be just as happy as when we have it. You know? We definitely should enjoy the ice cream. We're not saying, oh, I can't have that pleasure, it's not good for me. You know, unless, of course, you have some physical condition that the ice cream disagrees with. But, you know, we should definitely enjoy life and enjoy things. But to recognize that it's transitory, it doesn't last. You know, like how much chocolate ice cream can you eat before you say, if you have another mouthful, I'm going to get sick? You know, if chocolate ice cream was truly the cause of happiness, then the more you ate, the happier you would be. But there's at some point in there where you're going to go throw up because you can't possibly have any more and you're sick. You know, like this. You know.
No one?
Mas?
Can I do?
No, please.
Yeah. I have a personal thing that's in the other way, that it is, I know that empathy is not compassion, so I know the difference. And I don't consider myself indifferent, but I kind of develop a defensive response that if I see someone, I mean, I grow up with seeing a lot of pain, right? Like homeless people, beggars and things. So I suffer with that. I suffer a lot. And to kind of deal with this pain, I develop a kind of a block, so I don't relate to that. You know, it's like kind of, it's not precise that, but like when you turn your face and then you don't look for the pain because otherwise you will suffer together. So in terms of equanimity, how to deal with that? Because I feel if I just open myself, I would just melt in the pain, you know?
Mm-hmm. This is a question that comes up from time to time, and so it's certainly not unique for you. I don't know if I can recall the proper answer, but I can say a couple things. If we are aspiring bodhisattvas, like we aspire to develop, and we're not talking about engaging bodhisattvas. We're aspiring to be bodhisattvas, and looking at the suffering of others causes us pain in our heart, you know, and like, should I avoid that? You know, should this pain should I avoid that? And the answer that comes is to recognize that the pain I'm feeling here is not as great as the pain this being is experiencing. And if I'm aspiring to be a bodhisattva, I've got to look at it and understand that this discomfort that I'm feeling is what will fuel me to practice, to get to a point where I can look straight at it and be able to actually maybe help. You know, but if we shy away from looking at the suffering of others or the suffering we see because it's too hurtful here, then it limits our ability to help because we just step away rather than engaging. And I don't know. I think you have to sneak up on it. I don't think you can just say, well, right away I have to change like this. I think we have to gradually, as we increase our understanding of the suffering of others, especially, and we only understand the suffering of others until we understand our own suffering. You know, it's like somehow we have to be able to look at that and find a way to not let the pain we're doing here keep us from functioning. And I don't really have a very good answer for you. I'm sorry. No. So. Mas? Okay. So, the most important part of an occasion like this is the motivation at the beginning and the dedication at the end. So, we can dedicate with the wish that whatever we've talked about and understood becomes a cause of increasing our wisdom, our compassion, and our love, that would become perfect beings, the Buddhas ourselves, in order to be of perfect benefit in each and every sentient being. The supreme jewel bodhicitta, which has not arisen, arise and grow, and that which has arisen, not diminish, but increase more and more. So, thank you all very much. Goodbye. Thank you for joining us. I hope I didn't confuse you.